Long ago, when Earth was but a barren wasteland of rock, life was cheap, existence was pain, and death came at the drop of a hat. This embarrassed death greatly. After much struggle and hardship, we eventually grew as a species to build a utopian society where nothing bad ever happened to anyone. But peace, love, and understanding turned out to be painfully boring, leading some wishing to relive the good old days of caving each other's heads in with rocks for no reason. And so the computer was born, allowing us to virtually simulate the olden times of wanton destruction and ignorance beyond our wildest dreams. I kid, of course, things have never been good. It seems like the more things change, the more things stay the same. That being said, it's not a bad idea to look back in the past to appreciate how things have changed over time. And for that, we have games like 1993's Cosmology of Kyoto, a virtual time machine to the past where you can experience widespread paranoia, up-close poverty, debt, corrupt politics, and human cruelty all at its finest. If you know about this game in any capacity, there's a pretty good chance it's because you've heard that it's the only video game that film critic Roger Ebert ever enjoyed. I think that little piece of trivia tends to overshadow the game somewhat, so I don't want to talk too much about the guy, but it's still worth noting considering he pretty famously didn't like video games.
Now we have another toy that we want to review, the Sega Master System.
The only other one he even attempted to play was Myst, which he said he didn't have the patience for. I kind of get it, like, for as much as I love Myst, to get anything out of that game, you've gotta really want it. Cosmology of Kyoto, on the other hand, is a much more casual affair. It's a point-and-click adventure, but it's not a game about weird, esoteric puzzles. By modern standards, we'd probably consider it a walking simulator, which isn't actually a pejorative, even if that's the term that stuck. And if this post from 2003 on the Adventure Gamers forum is anything to go off of, this type of gameplay experience wasn't too highly regarded even back then either. The idea behind the walking simulator is to get you invested in a game's world without getting you hung up on systems or puzzles or whatever. Technically, this isn't even a new thing. For example, even by '93, Synergy Inc. had already been doing these kinds of games for a few years. Hell, Cosmology of Kyoto released the same year as Gadget, a very cinematic point-and-click adventure, and just a few years later you'd have stuff like LSD Dream Emulator dropping too. Ergo, Cosmology of Kyoto has you exploring the streets of 10th century Kyoto, aka Hyankyo, all without any real objective in mind. Not intent to peg this down as some boring field trip to the past, however, the game's world is very specifically filtered through the beliefs of the Heian period. So this leads the city of Hyankyo to be populated with those straight out of both fact and folklore. It's the kind of place where you can bump into a famous historical figure like Abe no Seimei, then turn a corner only to get jumped by a demon disguised as a jug of oil. More often than not, you will just die. Sometimes it'll be at the hands of a thief, sometimes it'll be a demon. Sometimes a plank of wood will come flying out of nowhere, crack you in the face, and actually send you to hell. You get better though, until you die again and repeat the process. Death is a cycle and an inevitability in Hyankyo. Luckily, this isn't like the Dark Souls of point-and-click adventure games or something stupid like that. Death has no actual consequence in-game outside of a little cutscene showing you reincarnating into one of Buddhism's 6 realms, which is something I never really knew about until playing this game because at its core, Cosmology of Kyoto is arguably an educational game. I can't honestly say that I know what the school curriculum was like for Japanese kids in 1993, but I'd imagine a lot of these places and names shown in the game might not mean much to a younger person playing it. They certainly didn't mean much to me, so that's why the game has a fairly extensive reference log you can bring up at any point in the game to give context to whatever you're seeing on screen at the time. Now, I know what you're thinking, little Billy. Man, what the heck is this? I don't want to learn stuff, that's not any fun. Well, guess what, you little shit? Maybe if you spent less time on your goddamn TikTok and more time educating yourself, your parents wouldn't have grounded you for flunking your ancient Japanese history class. So, the reference log is basically the Cliff Notes version of 10th century Japanese history, but if a name like Miyoshi no Kiyotsura means nothing to you, then it's an incredibly powerful tool to help you understand what's happening in the game. Hell, it's extensive enough that they actually give you the option to launch it straight from its own executable, which is something I've actually been doing while writing the script. For instance, there's multiple references in the game to a person named Sugawara no Michizane. Sugawara was a scholar and a politician who was deeply trusted by emperors Uda and Daigo. One of his political rivals, Fujiwara no Tokehira, conspired to have him exiled in 901 until Sugawara died in 903. Not long after, weird, spooky, bad shit started going down in the city, including a lightning strike on the Imperial Palace that killed multiple court nobles. So the people went and pinned all of said weird shit on Sugawara's vengeful ghost, and that's where Hyankyo is at when you wander your way into town. In real life, this all got so bad that they actually had to deify the guy as a god of storms in hopes that he'd just calm the fuck down. And nowadays he's considered the kami of learning in the Shinto religion. You can read about all this stuff and more in the game's reference log, but Cosmology of Kyoto takes all that fact and mythology and weaves it into a vivid, fucking terrifying, and sometimes very funny world all of its own.
あれが女房の死体です。
よしよし。今なら間に合う。わしが見ておるゆえ馬乗りになれ。資料が暴れても手を離してはならんぞ。よいか。
我に馬乗りに。
早く行け。
It's almost a bit Forrest Gumpy in how the player character just kind of bumblefucks their way into meeting all of these important figures and witnessing famous events, though the game plays the timeline pretty fast and loose in comparison. For instance, the opening text crawl places the events of the game vaguely within the 10th century. In real life, the lightning bolt that hit the Seiryoden happened in 930, a few months before Emperor Daigo's death. However, this means Abe no Seimei would have been about 9 years old at this point. Conversely, two important people in the game, two monks named Nichizo and Kuya, are both depicted as they would have been around 938 to 941 respectively. These two guys in particular really piqued my curiosity. Nichizo is one of the first people you can potentially run into at the start of the game, and he's responsible for giving you one of the most important items in it. Originally named Doken, and not to be confused with this Nichizo from the 13th century, Nichizo studied Shingon Buddhism at the Toji Temple in Hyankyo until fucking off to go train in the mountains where he supposedly died, got given a grand tour of hell for 13 days, then came back to life. Not unlike Dante Alighieri in the Inferno, or Goku in the Saiyan Saga. Then there's Kuya. He was a saint and a practitioner of Amida Buddhism, which plays a very large part in the overall themes of the game. So, reading straight out of the game here, Amida Buddhism, or Pure Land Buddhism, is the doctrine that those who believe in Amida Buddha will be reborn in the paradise of his Pure Land, which is a realm beyond the other 6 realms and a place where one has the potential to more easily reach enlightenment. You know, I'm having a swell time learning about all this old-time religion here. How are you all doing today? A quick reading of Kuya's Wikipedia page shows that he'd come to Hyankyo around the same time as the Tengyo Revolt, an event that displaced a lot of citizens from eastern Japan and forced them over towards the capital. It may be coincidence that the game opens with the player starting out in the middle of a field just outside Hyankyo, or it may be implying that the player character is one of said displaced citizens. I'm probably reading too much into it. It might not even matter much. There's a dead body right in front of you that you've got to steal the clothes and money off to continue. Since you do the same thing every time you reincarnate in the game, I have to assume the implication here is that your previous life got themselves killed in this field and you've literally just reincarnated. I think you can tell from the footage that the atmosphere in this game is pretty deadly. The art style is cartoony, but it's all rendered with a very uncomfortable level of detail and surprisingly directed with a keen eye for the cinematic. The game doesn't really sensationalize its violence, but my god is it grotesque. This may be one of the most graphic and horrific games I've ever played, which is a hell of an accomplishment for what is arguably an edutainment title. Half the buildings in this game are in ruins, everything is blanketed by darkness, parts of the city are just absolutely littered with corpses. Hyankyo is very clearly depicted as not a fun place to live. This is the kind of place where you'll get run up on by a thief or a demon and just die pointlessly. This is the kind of place where assholes will cut kids' heads off just because they were being an annoyance. The realm you reincarnate into depends on your in-game karma, but it doesn't matter all too much in the end. You could be an especially good boy this lifetime or otherwise. The cycle of death and rebirth is endless. But if death isn't an escape, then maybe, just maybe, there's another way out. So if you can't already tell, I'm going to recommend this game, but playing it nowadays comes with some caveats. Getting your hands on the game isn't an issue. It's considered abandonware at this point, so it's free for the taking, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The Collection Chamber blog is a full installer that makes the game super easy to play right out of the box, but this release has one pretty substantial issue. See, it's running the game in a Windows 3.1 installation through DOSBox. It's not really as awkward as it sounds, but until the game gets support from Scum VM, this is just how it's gotta be. Cosmology of Kyoto actually has text prompts throughout the game, usually just asking you yes or no questions, and they don't really function 100% anymore. For whatever reason, the DOSBox emulation adds in a hidden line break if you click on the text prompt, which you won't notice because it'll be covered by this white box. And this will fuck up your responses.
That's what I wrote. Am I supposed to write anything specific? Yes. I wrote exactly that.
Luckily, this is an easy workaround. Ideally, you'd want to get your hands on one of these bad boys, but that's not really a reasonable option. So, number 1, run it in DOSBox X since the white box issue doesn't seem to happen there, and number 2, just start typing whenever you get a text prompt. Otherwise, you'll have to make sure to hit down and backspace a few times to make sure you get rid of the line break. Now, I'm not going to claim that I've experienced everything there is to see in Cosmology of Kyoto, far from it in fact. I went for the ending, and I'm sure I left a lot of stuff to see still on the table. That's not really the point as far as I'm concerned, and I doubt the developers ever wanted anyone to treat this game like a collectathon of set pieces. For the purpose of this video, I've put in maybe about 5 or 6 hours into the game. According to Roger Ebert, he'd been playing for about 2 weeks and he'd still been finding new things to experience, though I have to wonder if he ever realized that half the map is barricaded off in order to funnel you towards the Imperial Palace. That's the one major complaint I have about this game. The map shown is accurate to the real layout of Hyankyo, but you can't access the entire eastern half of it. Would that be considered a game design white lie? I won't argue that there isn't more to see and learn about here, but there's no point to just listing off every interesting event that happens in the game anyway. Personally, this game has really piqued my interest in a lot of the concepts it presents, and I'm looking forward to reading more into them. Who knows, maybe when I upload my next yearly video, it'll just be 45 minutes of me chanting the Nenbutsu like a maniac. I think for me, if there's anything to take away from Cosmology of Kyoto, it's that beliefs may change, but people don't really change all that much. We just kinda keep doing the same things over and over. So, if the world isn't gonna change much on its own, maybe working to eliminate the cravings of all our worldly desires isn't the worst way to live. Also, fuck you, Omicron! You see, this is what a fucking reincarnation mechanic looks like. Fuck you, David Cage, you hack-ass piece of fucking shit!